Hello, I'm Max Glenn, care teaching artist for Cleveland Playhouse.
And I'm Ryan Lucas, marketing associate.
Welcome to Curtain Pulling, the Cleveland Playhouse podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this new little audio adventure. We wanted to give our audiences a look inside the work that goes on here at CPH. The format for this podcast is going to stick to brief interviews with CPH insiders and artists. Just a bite-sized look behind the curtain that fit right into your morning commute.
We're going beyond the kind of behind-the-scenes information you would expect from our Inside CPH series to cover different ground, just for you. We wanted this podcast to be a window into the talented people who are making and supporting the productions and educational programs here at CPH.
Speaking of which, today's guest is Director of Education Pamela DiPasquale.
Cleveland Playhouse was one of the first theaters in the country to pioneer educational programming, and Pamela is here to talk to us about how our educational mission has adapted to today's academic climate and what that means for our audiences.
Well, Pamela, thank you very much for joining us here today on Curtain Pulling. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess my first question is, so when CPH first started working on education programs around the 1920s and then on into the 1930s, as that was a trend that was changing in education in general, we began with very theater education-focused programs. It was how have our education programs developed in the many years since then? How does that look sort of in the modern era?
Sure. And first I have to clarify how the program started.
Oh, thank you.
So in the 1920s, Cleveland Playhouse had an apprentice program. And that was strictly to help young people, much like we still do today, young professionals, understand the art of theater. Very few of them actually were on stage, and they were working backstage in administration and all of those things. So it was very similar to the apprentice program we have now.
Oh, okay.
But it was local young people and youth as they were going through high school and into college. How were they going to begin a career in theater? And the Curtain Pullers program, and I love that name. It's ever so quaint, but it also reminds us that the program wasn't truly started for students to be on the stage. They were pulling the curtain, right, for somebody else to be there. So Esther Mullins in 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, looked around her community and said, okay, we've got a lot of youth in our city who really need something to do after school. They need to be constructive. They need to, find ways of expressing themselves positively and so forth. So she began the Curtain Pullers program in partnership with the then Cleveland Public Schools and brought kids in at the recommendation of their teachers, not because those were the most talented students, but because they were the students most in need. So she was starting a really, an incredible program of bringing children in so they had the full aspect of theater, everything from, pulling that curtain to working behind stage to eventually getting on stage. But it was truly an immersive program and not that traditional theater actor education that we might think of.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's interesting because doing a lot of the research that I've been doing for Centennial Moments, I think a lot of the focus was on the Curtain Pullers sort of later on once they started doing the children's theater program and once they were actually performing in productions.
Sure, yeah, and in fact, when Cleveland Playhouse built the 77th Street Theater, which is this is an act rather unheard of in regional theater, they actually on the floor plans in their design designated an area for curtain pullers and for the apprentice program. So there were classrooms and stages for those kids to learn. So to me, that's just an incredible commitment to those programs. And certainly, I think theater does this all the time. When we think of theater, we think of those people on stage, right? Those actors, maybe we think of the directors or the designers, but mostly we're just enjoying that aesthetic value. But we forget as a whole all of those things that happen behind stage and in the offices and so forth to make all of that happen, including raising the funds and so forth. So when you look at the documents that are saved or the pictures that are saved, we're looking at, those pictures of the kids on stage. But where are all the pictures of the kids who are working behind stage? Because they were doing that, or the program wouldn't have been called curtain pullers. But it's the same thing. We have production photos all over our office right now, but those photos are of the actors on stage, not all of the people behind. So, I think history tends to forget, exactly what those programs would have been.
Right. Yeah. And what's great about that is that for students who are sort of coming into these programs, they're definitely going to be fascinated and drawn in by theater. But maybe that's not necessarily what their calling ends up being.
Sure.
They're going to learn a lot of skills and programs like that they can take
Yeah.
into any vocation, sort of any art, anything that they're going to be working on afterwards.
Exactly. I had the great pleasure of talking to two older gentlemen who were curtain pullers the same time Paul Newman was a curtain puller.
Oh, great.
And we have that great picture of Paul, and we're all very proud that he started as a curtain puller. But these gentlemen were really well accomplished people who are now and were leaders in Cleveland. And they talked very specifically, because they always, refer to Paul going on and being, having his great success. But they had great success too, and they used all those skill sets like collaboration and creativity and critical thinking and problem solving. They used all those skill sets for something different, but they were still the same skill sets that they were getting. And they were really proud of what they had accomplished. And, somewhat proud of what Paul accomplished, but they thought they were better. And rightly so. They were fantastic.
That's great. Are you at liberty to say what field they're in? Can we talk about that? Would that be...
They are both philanthropists. I believe one is a lawyer, and I forget what the other one was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I asked because I have a friend who's a public defender who said that all of his time spent in theater, all the improv classes that he took, was more valuable than some of the law classes that he took for him.
Right, because it gives him those skill sets that he needs to be able to go and speak in public and think on his feet and make those decisions in that little split second that he has to make when he's defending somebody, right?
Right, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what some of our newest how some of our newest programs work, and sort of what needs in the community they're addressing specifically.
Sure. So as a regional theater, we have an obligation to meet the needs of our particular community. And our community has a lot of needs, especially with our youth population, and especially because Ohio is one of the states with the highest percentage of youth living in poverty. So we have a number of youth living in poverty, especially right here in Cleveland. And with poverty comes a variety of needs, everything from those basic needs like food and shelter and warm clothing, but other needs like how to build social and emotional competencies. How do you come into a classroom ready to learn when you are hungry and you don't have the right words to say how you're feeling in the moment, but yet you're expected to excel on your math test,
right? Yeah.
Right? So Cleveland Playhouse has two programs that help address both of those things. One of them is in collaboration with United Way of Greater Cleveland, and we serve as what's termed a lead agency for wraparound schools. So we're paired with 3 schools in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and all of these schools are investment schools, or the schools that have the lowest chronically performing students who need some sort of investment to change that for the students. So we have a full-time teaching artist in each one of those schools, but they don't actually teach. What they do is they use all those skill sets they've gained by being a theater artist. Just like I said before, creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those things that they've developed and honed to be able to be good at their craft in theater and take those into the school and solve problems maybe in a different way than is currently being solved. And they if they can solve the problem first by using arts, they do it. And when they can't, they find another person, a community member, organization, resource in the community to solve those problems. So Sort of a good example of this is all three of our wraparounds partner with the Cleveland Food Bank. So in each one of those three schools, there is 100% of students who live on or below the poverty line, meaning they qualify for free and reduced lunches. And often the only time those students are able to get a full meal is when they're at school. So during the summer or the weekends or in the evening, they might be hungry. So with the Cleveland Food Bank, they're able to provide dinners or food backpacks to take home over the weekend, or in the case of this summer, be a summer feeding site so children come to school to get their meals, even though it's not school time. And to me, that's sort of redefining access to theater education. So I can tell these teaching artists to go in and teach a theater education class all they want, and they can do it over and over and over again. But if the child is present physically but isn't present emotionally because his stomach hurts so much because he's hungry, the theater education class isn't going to have the impact it would if we weren't able to help find a way and a solution for them not to be hungry as well. So that sort of making sure access going beyond availability, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a wonderful service to the schools because so much. There's so many responsibilities that are loaded on the teachers, and there's so much that they have to focus on in their day that they see these things happening, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity to address them. Having those teaching artists there in the schools who know the students, who know the environment, who know the administrators and the teachers and can communicate quickly with them, they can find those needs very swiftly.
Right, and the whole idea of the wraparound is allow everybody to do what they do best. Let the teachers teach the student and allow the lead agency, not just that single teaching artist or site coordinator that we have in the building, but the whole lead agency work together with the whole community to make sure the children are ready to learn when they get in their classroom.
Right. Yeah, and one of the advantages of Cleveland Playhouse being having spent 100 seasons here in Cleveland is we've built so many relationships with different sponsors, supporters, organizations that we've worked with over the years. That gives us a lot of connections that we can then find.
Sure. So we do. We have really great connections across the community. So sometimes, for instance, the schools didn't have enough art supplies. We were able to make, one phone call with an art supply company and $30,000 of art supplies arrived, which is fantastic. But we also, as an organization, have a great many skill sets that a school doesn't have. And I'll give you an example. At one of our schools, Elmira Academy, they were having a really difficult time having parents come to parent nights or engagement nights and so forth, or events specifically for parents. And they averaged about 8 parents per engagement night, but there are 450 families in that school, and they were getting really frustrated. Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? So we went to the marketing department at Cleveland Playhouse and said, maybe this is a marketing issue. And what we found was that the principal was sending a note home on school stationery that went into the kid's backpack that looked very bland and said, there's a literacy night, hope you come, or whatever it is. So first of all, most of those things didn't get to the parents. And the ones that did, the parents were like, oh no, another whatever, I'm not going to read it. So marketing helped us come up with a strategy to do a direct mailing. Our graphics art department created a very lively, engaging poster that looked like an invitation to a party. So, and then subscriber services helped us be able to do that direct mailing. So those are all skill sets, graphic design, marketing concepts and strategies, and direct mailings that schools shouldn't, they shouldn't know how to do that. That's not their job. Yet to get the parents into the schools, they needed to have those skills. Well, we didn't have to teach them how to do it. We just had to go to our organization and tap on all the skill sets we had and send that postcard out. So that average 8-person or parent attendance went to 475 for that particular event, where our services helped let parents know that, and everybody was so thrilled and surprised that we were like running out at the last minute to buy more pizza that was promised
wow.
for the event, because we never ever expected to get that big of a turnaround. But Cleveland Playhouse is in the business of gathering masses to come experience an event together. So let's use those skills to gather the masses of parents and have them experience an event together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, my favorite example, just because I had a personal connection to this, was taking photos of the murals that the paint shop was doing in the different investment schools. Were lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So each one of the schools has what's called an action plan, what they have to improve at their schools, and each one of our schools, the community members had said we want public art representations of us in our community. And we have artists on staff, just amazing, incredible visual artists who, paint everything that goes on our sets. So they were able to come in and work with each one of the schools in different capacities. But at one school, they spent some time with the 7th and 8th grade students, asked them to describe community, asked them to visually represent community, and then create just a beautiful mural that they were able to paint, in the hallway of the school. So when the children arrive every day, they see themselves and the work they created painted right on the wall.
Right. Their voice is represented in that artwork that's there. Yeah.
Exactly. At another school, Jameson, their mascot is a jaguar. And it was so much fun the day the scenic artists were painting that jaguar, because the kids were all looking up at it and going, "That is so raw. That is amazing. How can you do that?" And to the point where the 4th grade boys were so involved in it, they were trying to get the scenic artists to make bigger fangs and longer claws because they wanted this jaguar to just be incredible. But the principal came out of her office and looked up at it and was so excited to have it there without realizing that there were children all over the hall, said, "That's damn beautiful." And we were like, "Yay, we're glad you like it."
But look out.
It was amazing. But I was just at the school the other day, and we came out of her office, and she looked up there and, had a little sigh and a smile and said, "I love seeing that every day." So just that representation every day, a reminder that visual arts and fine arts can be present in your life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I know one of the precursors. It was sort of happening in conjunction with some of the early education programs. Was the Puppet Players Guild?
Yeah.
Were these puppet shows that were put on specifically for children, for younger audiences? Can you tell us a little bit about how that same concept has sort of what that same concept looks like today?
Sure, the idea of how do we reach children audiences?
Yeah, sort of bringing theater to students.
Yeah, so just to put that original productions into historical context, 1903 was the first time America saw any theater for youth, and that was a Broadway production of The Little Princess. So by 1916, Cleveland Playhouse was producing puppet theater for children, and it started off as a performance for the artists and board members and staff members and so forth, and their children. So a family that need to make sure their children were involved, exposed, participating in the same art that excited them, right? And the idea that the children deserved to have that experience just like they deserved to have that experience, and that they were doing it, less than, or just a little over a decade of when that whole concept was introduced to America. That's crazy to me and really on the forefront. And in fact, children's theater as a whole in the United States outside of Broadway didn't start until the 1920s with a junior league movement. So we were Cleveland Playhouse on the forefront of sharing the art with the children and recognizing that children deserve that same art. So that same sort of philosophy has sort of followed the Cleveland Playhouse for 100 years, right? And so for instance, we have a touring program, University Hospitals and Rainbow Babies Hospitals Classroom Matinee. And what we do is take the same themes and concepts from one of our main stage productions. And the themes, and I just have to go back. Our artistic director, Laura Kepley, chooses plays because she believes the themes and concepts and ideas that are percolating in a play are also percolating in the community, and that those plays allow the community to talk about things in a safe environment and so forth. So our belief is that if we want to talk about those concepts, themes, and ideas with adults in our community, we should want to talk about those with the youth too. So, but sometimes, for instance, this year, we're taking the themes from the Crucible and sharing those with kindergarten students, right? So we can't bring kindergarten students to see the Crucible because it's not appropriate, and plus they can't sit still for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the idea of truth and personal accountability and responsibility for your actions to kindergarten students. Mm-hmm. So we take those themes and we commission and develop a play where we then go directly to the students in the school. So they're not spending an hour on a bus and 45 minutes in the theater and then another hour back on the bus, but we're going right to their schools and performing those plays for them, and having those conversations with them, the same conversations their parents and grandparents and aunts and family members and guardians are all having, because they deserve to experience that too.
Yeah, and I just know, having seen both of the shows that we were running last year, having been there to document, the students really do react. Like, they really identify with what's going on stage.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. We had we commissioned for the Classroom Matinee a play based on Good People. And Good People is a very hard to swallow but amazing play about socioeconomic, issues and racial issues. So that type of diversity. And in the play we were working on, we're talking about that too. And there's characters who are living in poverty. And when we would go into urban schools where we knew the majority of kids were living in poverty, for many of them, this was the first time all of those thoughts and feelings that they were having about living in poverty were expressed on stage, but just expressed for them. And what we would find is that the children would identify immediately with the actor who was playing the child in poverty, and would often care for her after the show. So they'd want to hold her hand or give her a hug or tell her it would be okay. And so that fun sort of suspension of disbelief, but also the lack of being able to understand the difference between, theatrical magic and reality. But they bonded with her, and they believed that her character, Margie, was experiencing those same things they were experiencing. And they saw through her grit and determination that she couldn't change her circumstances because she was only 7 years old.
Right. But
she could try and figure out how to navigate those circumstances and make things a little better for herself and her family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very exciting hearing the students discussing the show afterwards, because having been on stage myself, it feels so good when the audiences are talking about the play afterwards. You're like, oh, thank God, I did well. We did
exactly. What's funny too is for the actors and their professional actors who work on our Classroom Matinee program, if they haven't worked with students before, it's one of the things that they come to appreciate very quickly is the joy of having children in the audience. And when the children are, on their knees leaning forward, can't wait till they hear what's next. It's that moment of captivation for the kids and the actors that is just magic. They forget that they're in a school gym and they think they're in, on a street block in South Boston watching a little girl navigate how to get on the bus.
Right. Yeah, and what's really exciting is that in some schools, sort of depending on their schedule, the teaching artists will then go do workshops right after the performance. So the students will have the opportunity to see this person playing a character on stage, and then that same artist comes into their classroom for instruction. It's really exciting.
It's so much fun for them because for the artists, they already have this established connection with the students. That they've both went on this same emotional journey, right? So they have this common knowledge of this play and this experience that they arrive into the classroom with. And it's a unique way to then be able to unpack something that's in their common core or that is in their regular instruction, but it's a new way to look at it with a new emotional perspective. And a lovely little bond between the actor and the student to be able to have that exchange, on a more personal basis.
Right. Yeah. And just for me, seeing some of those workshops, it was really great to see the teaching artists empowering the students to talk about their reactions and their reflections to the piece. Like I know, having been in school, I know there are a lot of kids who are very shy, who not necessarily want to talk, and that gives them a platform to talk about how they felt, which is really great.
Right, and sometimes the work, that piece of art, has so captivated them, so inspired them, that a child who might normally not want to speak now is compelled to speak.
Right.
And it changes that dynamic. And we so often have teachers say, I didn't know that child could do that. I didn't know that child could sit for that long. I didn't know that child could speak up. I didn't know that child had that knowledge. And it's just because the theater provides that opportunity to show a child in a different light. And then for the teacher to be able to redefine how he or she thinks of that child.
Right, yeah. And having seen those workshops, I think our teaching artists are just so great at identifying with the students. I got to see Robert in particular doing his class. And one of the brilliant things that he did was drawing parallels between their lives and things that happen in the play. Like he got really involved with wanting to hear sort of their personal stories and like how things were for them and sort of solidifying the idea that, the things you see in plays, the things that are happening in theater are relevant to your life, sort of regardless of when the play is set necessarily. This may not be a play that's set in Cleveland, but you can see the connections being, being someone who lives in Cleveland.
Right, and be able just to solidify that idea that theater introduces us to others, but it also reintroduces us to ourselves, right? And that it's about a human bond and a human connection. And we can see it figuratively when the students are watching the show, but we can see it literally in those workshops after when they're actually having those conversations and say, that character's like me. I've been in that experience. Or, you know what? I've never experienced it before, but now I understand what it would mean to be in that place. Or at least I can empathize with it.
Excellent. Well, Pamela, thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate having you on.
Oh, thank you so much. It was fun.